G'day, Justin Morris here from Mind Matters Athlete Coaching with another episode of No Baloney Bike Advice. This time we're going to be talking about the frame of the bike and the associated bearings that come in the frame and some of these other parts that are attached to it, the handlebar and the seat. Now first things first, see me bike here, it's nice and spick and span and clean. This is the number one piece of free advice that's going to gain you some extra speed out there without having to do any extra training. Keeping your bike clean. A clean bike is a fast bike. And also, if you're on a team or if you ever have any interest in joining a professional cycling team, the number one way to become a public enemy of the mechanics on the team is to turn up to a race with dog crap all over your bike. You want to turn up to a race with this thing spick, sparkling clean. It's going to be do you many favours in the race, and you're going to win over the camaraderie of your staff on your team. Anyway, let's have a closer look. We'll start up here. This is your handlebars. Now, if you're looking for an area of the bike where you can waste some pointless money, then it's up here on handlebar and stem. If you see these fancy carbon aero handlebars that are going to set your back and arm and a leg, and you're counting your pennies, that's not a good place to waste your money on. Aluminium up here in the bar and the stem, it's been around for donkey's years. It's going to do you a lot of favours. It's nice and stiff and rigid. If you were, God forbid, to come off in an accident, your aluminium you can generally trust and do less damage and cost you a lot less dollars if it does get damaged in an accident. Now, your handlebars, that's the front of the bike, bar tape. Now, this is one thing that I'm a bit different to a lot of people. I like to run this as thin as possible and just feel the road, all the little deviations and ruts and kind of corrugations of the road. Thin bar tape, you get good sensations of the terrain you're riding on. You can get some bar tape now, it's like you might as well be running a piece of foam all through your handlebars. Real thick bar tape might be more comfortable, but you're not experiencing what the true sensation of the road is. Now further back here, this is a key part of the bike that often gets neglected. It's called the headset. There's a bearing in the top here and a bearing underneath here. On modern bikes, this is all a sealed bearing. They don't use ball bearings in here. Because there's no sideways pressure on a headset, it's just the bearings only move in that kind of rotation. So a nice sealed bearing in that part of the bike is pretty easy to maintain. Just make sure you chuck some grease in there every so often, especially if you like to wash your bike with a pressure hose and spray it with water every so often. Keep that part of the bike nice and greased up. It'll do you many favours. Down here, this is the number one most neglected part of the bike that can have a huge impact on your performance. It's called the bottom bracket. It's a bearing in here. There's one on the left and the right. Now, if I was to tell you one of the things that I think has been detrimental in bicycle development over the past 10 or 15 years, it's a movement to, for some reason, they've decided to get, I believe the reason is cost, instead of having these bearings screw onto the frame, they're pressed into the frame. So back in the day, most bikes, or all bikes, you could screw the bearing in here, and when it's worn out, you unscrew it and chuck a new one in. Now, they managed to save the price on the production of the frame by removing the thread here, and instead these bearings, you've got to use a big bearing press, and they're just shoved into the frame. So when they wear out, or you get much grit and sand and stuff in there, you can often damage the frame as well as the bearing, meaning that you're up for all kinds of dramas. If you can find a modern bike, I believe Pinarello is one brand that still does them threaded. Trek is moving to a few of their models with threaded bottom brackets now. I can't recommend that highly enough. A threaded bottom bracket going to save you a lot of grief down the track, and as far as working on the bike, it's a huge benefit for you. The other thing, if you've got buckets of money and you're looking for something to waste it on, well, not waste, use it on, these bearings here, the bottom bracket, you can get what's called a ceramic bearing. Ceramic bearing reduces the amount of friction that's needed to turn that bearing around. And because every time you pedal, you're turning this bearing all the way around, if you put a real good ceramic bearing in there, you'll save yourself a few watts, or you'll free up a few extra watts that you can then put into the pedals and give you speed instead of dragging through friction in a bearing. So ceramic bearing there will do you a bit of favours. You can also get ceramic bearings in your jockey wheels back here. That'll again reduce the friction that your chain needs to go around to make your bike move. So that's going to make you a little bit faster also. But the number one, if you're looking for the most cost-effective way to gain some extra speed on your bike through bike maintenance, and will only cost you about $12 every 6 months or so, that is just keeping this bad boy with plenty of chain lube on there. Clean it and then lube it regularly, rather than riding around. I see that many people riding around with chains as dry as a dead dingo's donger, and it's really sapping your energy. You're just dumping junk watts into the pedals. If this thing's nice and clean and lubricated, you're just going to save yourself much nicer shifting, and you're going to go faster. But I think that covers it for road bikes now. We've gone through a few things: wheels, drivetrain, frame, bearings, handlebars. The seat is a kind of personal thing. Once you find a seat that works for you, you're probably going to stick with it for life. But yeah, apart from that, you're pretty much ready to ride. Listen to the experts rather than the marketing gurus, and you'll be out there getting some speed, smashing some KOMs, and maybe even winning a race when we're allowed to do that again. Cheers.